morning, everybody! This is the TSMU fan here. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is well cherished by its fans because the series is set in reality. Nearly every single story is based on some real-life event in railway history, and this is why it stands out. The characters are also based in reality too. Almost all of the characters are based on real steam engines that you can still see today, and a lot of these characters that we know and love belong to real railways in the UK. This video will be going over all the characters in the series that wear the initials or logos of real railways on them. We'll discuss a brief history of the character, the railway that they belong to, and some history on the real-life engine they're based on. Now, before we get into it, we have to set some ground rules. Rule number 1, we will only be covering TV series characters in this video, so railway series exclusive characters will not be covered here. We will, however, be bringing in railway series elements if a character is seen in a livery that they do not wear in the TV series. Rule number 2, characters that wear NWR on them will not be covered here, as NWR stands for Northwestern Railway, which of course is the railway on the island of Sodor. And of course, Sodor isn't a real place, nor is the Northwestern Railway a real railway. We will only be covering characters that have the initials of real-life railways, not fictional ones. So characters like Rosie and Rebecca will not be acknowledged. And finally, rule number 3, for the sake of keeping this video at a reasonable length, we will not be covering a character if we never see them wear the initials or logos of a real railway at any point. For example, Edward is owned by the Furness Railway, but we never see him wearing their initials in the books or the show, so he will not be covered. Now, with a guideline of rules all set up and without further ado, let's jump in and cover every Thomas character that belongs to a real railway. First off, we have our favorite little engine, and Thomas is his name. Thomas arrived rather mysteriously to Sodor in 1915 during World War II. It's unclear how he found his way there. Perhaps it was a mix-up. However, Sir Topham Hatt bought him for a nominal sum, and though he wasn't the first engine on the island, he was the first purchased, and so was given his iconic number 1. In the 2015 70th anniversary special, The Adventure Begins, Thomas is seen in his original livery, with the initials LBSC on his tank sides. LBSC stands for the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway. Thomas is based off of the real-life E2 class tank engines, which were owned by this railway in real life. There was a class of 10 E2s designed by Lawson Billington, and they were generally employed for shunting and piloting duties at Victoria Station and local goods trains. Introduced in 1913, the E2 class was the first of Billington's own designs for the LBN SCR, built to replace some of the early Stroudley E1 goods engines. With the advantage of improved boiler feeds, the E2 class were less restricted in their activities than the E1 class. However, the first 5 members of the class suffered from inadequate water capacity. To fix this, the next batch of 5 engines were given extended side tanks, increasing water capacity. Thomas is specifically based on the E2s with the extended side tanks. After World War II, in 1948 the Southern Railway was absorbed into British Railways, and the class were reallocated to Southampton Docks to replace withdrawn E1 class engines on trip working and shunting in the mid-1950s, working alongside Southern Railway USA class tank engines. Yep, Thomas and Rosie's relationship in the hit era actually has some history behind it. Anyways, when the E2 class was retired, it was one of the last classes of the LBN SCR to be withdrawn, along with the E4 and A1 classes, all of which were retired in 1963. Sadly, none of the E2 class tank engines survived into preservation. It's unclear which of the E2s Thomas is supposed to be. Only 105 and 106 were built early enough to be Thomas, placing his build date sometime in 1915. It's also possible that he could have been a fictional addition to the class as well. Anyways, there's not much really else to talk about regarding Thomas, so let's move on to our next character now. Next up on this list is everyone's favorite steam tram, Toby. So Topham Hatt the First met him when he was a boy, while he and his family were on vacation, and after Thomas got into trouble with a grumpy policeman, "Oi, you!" Toby was purchased for use on the Farquhar branch line when his old branch line closed, and very fortunate Toby was to receive a new home. As he states himself, the station master would have used his faithful coach Henrietta as a hen house if he was left behind. In Book 32 of the Railway series, titled Toby Trucks in Trouble, we see Toby working at a harbor in East Anglia with his brothers. In these illustrations, Toby wears the initials L and ER on his side plates, which stands for the London and North Eastern Railway. Toby is based off of the GER Class C53, which were later reclassified as the L and ER Class J70 when grouping occurred in the UK. These strange-looking tram engines were used on the Wisbech and Upwell Tramway and the ports of Great Yarmouth and Ipswich. They replaced earlier GER Class G15s that had a similar appearance. The first withdrawal was in 1942. The remaining 11 locomotives were renumbered 8216 to 8226 in 1944 and passed to British Railways in 1948 on nationalization, after which the prefix 6 was added to their numbers. Withdrawals restarted in 1949 and the last went in 1955. Sadly, like Thomas's basis, none of these steam trams still exist today. One of the J70s was actually set aside to be preserved, number 7129. It sat in storage at Stratford Works before being very unfortunately scrapped in error. We were so close to having a J70 preserved and having a real-life Toby the Tram engine, which leads me into an interesting fact about Toby. Did you know that Toby was in fact the first character in the series to be based on a real-life engine? Yup, that's right. It wasn't City of Truro, or the Flying Scotsman, or even Stepney. It was Toby. So way back in 1951, the Audrey family went on a summer holiday to Gorleston, Norfolk. Wilbur and his son Christopher were wandering around nearby Great Yarmouth when they came upon a tram engine, became friends with his crew, and took some photographs. This tram engine was the J70 numbered 68221. This tram was originally built as GR number 127 on June 30th, 1914 as a part of a batch of 3 at Stratford. In 1924, after grouping, it became LNER number 7127, this changing to number 8221 in May 1946 under Edward Thompson's 1946 renumbering scheme. Upon nationalization on January 1st, 1948, it became number 68221 in July 1948. Both Wilbur and Christopher were intrigued by this engine, and when the holiday was over, Wilbur began looking for a way to incorporate this character into the Railway series. A solution was found when Wilbur's brother George researched details of tramway regulations and found a law that stated,
"Engines going on public roads must have their wheels covered and a cowcatcher in front."
This justified bringing Toby to Sodor, and he has been a hard worker on the railway since then. Now, let's move on from Toby to some more characters inspired by real engines. Next up is everyone's favorite pannier and a very beloved fan favorite character, Duck. Duck was brought to Sodor in 1955 to take over Percy's shunting duties at Tidmouth, leaving the latter free to assist with the construction of Knapford Harbor. Duck wears the initials GWR on his tank sides, and this stands for the famous Great Western Railway. Duck is based on the GWR 5700 class, built by the Great Western Railway and British Railways between 1929 and 1950. With 863 of these tank engines built, they were the most prolific class of the GWR, and one of the most numerous classes of British steam locomotive. Although officially designated by the GWR as light goods and shunting engines, they were also used for passenger work on branch, suburban, and shorter mainline journeys. They were distributed across most of the GWR network and across the western region of British Railways after nationalization in 1948. As a result of the 1955 modernization plan, the 5700 class was withdrawn from BR service between between 1956 and 1966. 19 5700s were sold for further use after being withdrawn by British Railways. The National Coal Board bought 5, 1 was bought by PD Fuels, and 13 were bought by London Transport. One more locomotive, number 9642, was withdrawn in 1964 and sold to Hayes Scrapyard. It was used for 3 years to shun other locomotives being scrapped and was later saved for preservation. 16 5700 class locomotives have been preserved, of which one half are from the original 5700 class and the other half are members of the 8750 subclass. 11 are Swindon-built class members, with the remaining 5 being from outside contractors. Of the 16 engines, 5 are currently operational. Duck is based on a very specific 5700 class, number 5741, as he wears the number of this real-life engine in all of the illustrations. The real 5741 was withdrawn on June 30th, 1957, and scrapped at Swindon on May 31st, 1958. However, this is where things start to get a little confusing. In Book 12 of the Railway series titled The 8 Famous Engines, Duck recalls working at Paddington Station.
"Rubbish," said Duck. "London's Paddington. I know. I work there."
The real-life 5741 never worked at Paddington, as it was first allocated at Aberbeeg Blanau Gwent, with its last allocation at Newport Pill when it was withdrawn in June 1957. Christopher notes in Sodor Reading Between the Lines that this might not, in fact, be the number with which he was allocated when built in 1929. Still, Duck is based off of a real engine and wears the number of a real-life engine that belonged to a real railway. Now, let's move on from Duck, a very beloved fan-favorite character, to another well-beloved fan-favorite character. Or should I say, characters? Next on our list is 2 characters, and they are everyone's favorite Scottish twin engines, Donald and Douglas. Donald and Douglas arrived on the island of Sodor in 1960. The railway was busier than ever during this time, and more people had come to travel on the railway. Sir Charles Topham Hatt II had, in fact, ordered only one engine to help out with the extra work, Caledonian Railway number 57646. Anxious not to be separated from his brother, number 57647 came along too. Since the engine's numbers had somehow come off on the way to Sodor according to the twins, there was no telling which was which. Anxious to be fair, and also to find out which was the better of the two, Sir Charles Topham Hatt II ordered tests for both. However, after a somewhat inauspicious start, both performed equally well, and he decided to keep them both. Donald and Douglas have been hard workers and have proven to be an invaluable asset to the railway. When Donald and Douglas first arrived to Sodor in Book 15, The Twin Engines, if you look very closely in the illustrations of Hello Twins, before the twins received their later Northwestern numbers, you can see the British Railways' early crests on their tenders. Donald and Douglas's bases, the Caledonian Railway 812 and 652 classes, did indeed work under British Railways in real life. 76 of these engines survived into British Railways ownership and were renumbered by replacing the 17,000 series numbers with 57,000 series. The final number of this class of engine went up to 57645 in real life. So Donald and Douglas's BR numbers 57646 and 57647 are entirely fictional and would have made them the actual final members of the class in real life. The 812 class does have one preserved engine that still runs today. Caledonian Railways number 828 is the sole survivor of the class and is an important example of Scottish industrial heritage. It is based at the Strathspey Railway in Scotland. Anyways, there's not much more to really talk about regarding Donald and Douglas, so let's move on to the next character. Next up is the fabulous diesel rail car, Daisy. She was extremely cocky when she arrived to the railway in 1960 after Thomas had a nasty accident, but after a while realized that she was supposed to be a part of a team, and sobered down considerably to everyone's benefit. In Book 16 of the Railway series titled branch line engines. In the story Bullseyes, you can see Daisy wearing the British Railways cycling lion crests on her sides. Daisy is based on the diesel multiple units, or DMUs for short, built by Metro Camel for British Railways. Although Daisy is unique in the way that she was built specially as a single car unit to help on the Farquhar branch. The diesel multiple units were never built as a single car, making Daisy very unique. In 1955, British Rail published a modernization plan to streamline the railway network, bringing it up to date in comparison to European standards. Steam power would be phased out in favor of diesel-powered rail cars and locomotives, and BR hoped that by replacing steam with DMUs, costs would be reduced sufficiently to make rural lines viable. Since there was no time for BR to issue a standard specification, train builders were invited to submit plans on the understanding that the units could be built and put into service quickly. Having gained experience with early lightweight DMUs, Metro Camel won a contract to put the Class 101 into production. This diesel engine featured a steel chassis with an aluminum body to reduce weight. 5 orders for batches were placed for the type. Metro Camel advertised their new train, highlighting the wide availability and modern features that the 101 offered. Demand was so high that at one point, 4 cars per week were rolling off the Washwood Heath production lines. The trains underwent testing on the Sutton Park line near the works from 1956 before the sets were released to BR. Numerous DMUs are preserved today on heritage railways in the UK, and one of these diesels, specifically number 101685 on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, was named Daisy after the character. It's really sweet that they chose to give a real Class 101 that name. Anyways, let's move on from Daisy to another big diesel in the series. Next up is everyone's fan favorite and a sadly forgotten face in the TV series now, BoCo. In 1965, BoCo found his way to the Brenda branch line, where the mischievous twin engines Bill and Ben played a prank on him. Sir Charles Topham Hatt II, however, expressed interest in buying him, and BoCo was purchased, becoming the second diesel engine owned on the railway. In the TV series, BoCo can be seen with a Lion and Wheel British Railways logo near his rear doors. BoCo is based on, as Edward states in the Diesel,
The Metropolitan Vickers, Diesel Electric Type 2.
Otherwise known as the British Railways Class 28, these diesel engines were built under the pilot scheme as a part of the British Railways 1955 modernization plan. Work had begun on the pilot scheme in 1954, and the first plan for the entire class of 174 locomotives had been produced by October 1954, including 20 of these Metrovic Type B locos, although orders were not placed until November 1955. In July 1956, the Type A, B, and C designations were changed to Types 1, 2, and 4, making these diesel engines Type 2. All 20 Metrovics were initially allocated to the Midland Division of BR's London Midland region, where they were often used in pairs on the overnight London-Glasgow Condor Express freight service and to cover for failure. After refurbishment in 1961, they were all transferred to the Barrow-in-Furness 12E depot. They were withdrawn after only 11 years at work and in service, and only a single member of this class survives today, number D5705 on the East Lancashire Railway. In an interview with Wilbert for the 1987 Thomas & Friends Annual, BoCo was delighted to discover that D5705 was preserved, having previously thought that all his classmates were scrapped. According to BoCo, this real-life engine is in fact his brother, and the two siblings used to work together on the mainland. D5705 is currently undergoing a restoration process in Derbyshire. Fun fact, BoCo's number D5702 belongs to a real member of this class of diesel engine, possibly implying that BoCo is this diesel. The real D5702 was built on September 29, 1958, and in the first 3 years of operation, the first 4 locomotives worked an average annual mileage of 30,135. Individual performances were varied, with D5703 at the bottom of the scale putting up only 19,982 miles, and D5702 on the the other hand, more than doubling this with an annual mileage of 42,837. D5702 was withdrawn on September 7th, 1968, before being scrapped at J. Cashmore scrapyards the following year. Interestingly enough, another member of BoCo's class and another relative of his has also appeared in Escape from Enterprising Engines. When Oliver and his crew are hiding from the mainland diesels looking for them, a Class 28 in BR Blue can be seen. Only one Class 28 was painted in this livery, that engine being the second of the class, D5701. Now, let's move on from diesel engines back to steam engines, and this next one is a pretty famous visitor. Next up, we have the real-life loco City of Truro. City of Truro visited the Sodor Railway alongside the Railway Society in 1957. Duck, although shy at first, quickly befriended him, as the two were both Great Western engines. Duck talked Great Western all night with City of Truro, which made him very proud of his Great Western ancestry, much to the annoyance of Gordon, who was jealous of City of Truro's record and attempted to go as fast as him, only to have his dome blown off on the viaduct. Now, his only appearance in the TV series is Season 3's Gordon and the Famous Visitor. But you might be wondering, why does City of Truro count? He doesn't have initials of a real railway on him or a logo anywhere on his model. Well, as a matter of fact, he does. If you look closely at his tender, you can see that the model makers gave him the early 1900s Great Western Railway monogram, which the engine did indeed wear in real life as a form of indication of GWR ownership. So whatever, we can talk about City of Truro for a bit. City of Truro is a 440 steam locomotive built in 1903 for the Great Western Railway at Swindon Works to a design by George Jackson Churchward. It was partially rebuilt in 1911 and 1915 and renumbered 3717 in 1912. Although it is a point of contention, some believe the locomotive to be the first to attain a speed of 100 miles per hour during a run from Plymouth to London Paddington in 1904. However, its speed was recorded with stopwatch timing. The Flying Scotsman became the first official engine to go 100 miles per hour, with recorded evidence from a dynamometer car. After the 1904 speed record, City of Truro continued to pull trains in everyday service until it was rendered obsolete in 1931, being withdrawn from service in March that year. The engine is still around and is currently on display at the Museum of the Great Western Railway in Swindon. And speaking of the Flying Scotsman, next up, let's cover one of the most famous steam engines in the world, the famous Flying Scotsman. In 1967, Flying Scotsman came to Sodor to cheer up his only surviving brother, Gordon. He had two tenders at the time he arrived, causing Henry to feel jealous. During his visit, he got on well with most of Sir Topham Hatt's engines and took charge of the Limited in place of Bear when Henry rescued both him and D199 after both diesels failed. After his visit, Flying Scotsman left with his owner. In the TV series, Gordon doesn't seem to know who Flying Scotsman is, which is a little odd. You'd think that they'd keep the brothership they have consistent. They do bring it back when Scotsman was reintroduced for the CGI series in The Great Race, but that's not the case here for tender engines. Anyways, in both the books and in the show, Flying Scotsman wears the initials L and ER on his tender. As we established earlier with Toby, L and ER stands for the London and North Eastern Railway. Flying Scotsman is an L and ER Class A3 462 Pacific type steam locomotive built in 1923 for the London and North Eastern Railway at Doncaster Works to a design of Sir Nigel Gresley. It was employed on long-distance express passenger trains on the East Coast Main Line by L&ER and its successors, British Railways Eastern and Northeastern regions, notably on the Flying Scotsman service, after which it was named between London King's Cross and Edinburgh Waverley. 4472 became a flagship locomotive for the L&ER, representing the company twice at the British Empire Exhibition, and on November 30th, 1931, 1924, it set a world record for steam traction, becoming the first locomotive to reach the officially authenticated speed of 100 miles per hour. Retired from British Railways in 1963 after covering 2.08 million miles, the locomotive earned considerable fame and preservation under the ownership of Alan Pegler, who brought the engine to the United States on a tour. While on a second tour in Australia on August 8, 1989, it set another world record for the longest non-stop run of a steam locomotive of 422 miles. As a result of these achievements, Flying Scotsman has been described as the world's most famous steam locomotive. Since 2004, the National Railway Museum has acquired the locomotive, and it still runs on the British Main Line with excursion trains to this day. Now, from one green engine to another green engine. Next up is Duck's partner on the Little Western, Oliver. In 1967, Oliver's crew, alarmed that his branch line in the West Country was about to be closed, plotted to escape to the island of Sodor along with his brake fan Toad. Douglas comes across them in the yards at Barrow and decides to help Oliver out on the last part of his journey. Since being saved from the scrapyards, Oliver and Toad have worked on the Little Western alongside Duck ever since. Like Duck, Oliver wears the initials GWR on his side tanks, which, as mentioned earlier, is the Great Western Railway. Oliver's GWR is different from Duck's, however, as he wears the 1934 GWR shirt button crest. Oliver is based on the real-life GWR 1400 class, and these engines were designed by the Great Western Railway for branch line passenger work. It was originally classified as the 4800 class when introduced in 1932 and renumbered in 1946. The 4800 class was designed as a more modern version of the 517 class, which were by then beginning to show their relative age. The first locomotive, number 4800, was built by Swindon Works and entered service in 1932, with 74 engines of this type following it up to 1936. The 4800 class locomotives retained their original numbers until the GWR decided to experimentally convert 12 2800 class 280s for oil firing. It was decided that the converted engines would be reclassified as the 4800 class, and so the 75 tank engines already carrying this designation were reclassified as the 1400 class, with running numbers ranging from 1400 to 1474. The 2800 class engines, however, did not revert to their original classification after the experiment ended in 1948. The 1400 class was designed to work with the GWR design of Autocoach, a specialist vehicle with driving controls designed for push-pull working, and they worked in the western region until scrapping commenced in 1956, and all were withdrawn by early 1965. Numbers 1442 and 1450 were withdrawn from Exmouth Junction Shed in May 1965. By the early 1960s, several had been in store for some time, being occasionally steamed to replace failed diesels. 4 1400 class tank engines are thankfully preserved on heritage railways today. Now, just like Duck, Oliver was also based on a specific 1400 class and carries the real-life number of 1436 in the Railway series. 1436 was built at Swindon Works in August 1934 as number 4836 and worked in the west of England, West Midlands, and West London until it was withdrawn in October 1958. It was scrapped at Moorcote Ltd, Caerphilly on the 1st of October 1958. According to The Island of Sodor, Its People, History, and Railways, and Sodor reading between the lines, it is doubtful whether this was the number actually allotted to him in 1946. What's even more interesting is that 1436 isn't the number that Oliver consistently wears in the books. The restored illustrations from 2015 from Book 24, Oliver the Western Engine, reveal the number 1420 on his front buffer beam. 1420 is the number of another real-life 1400 class preserved on the South Devon Railway, and this engine was likely used as reference for the illustrator. And funnily enough, 1420 was named in preservation. What was its name? Bolivar.
Coincidence? I think not!
Anyways, let's move on now to some TV exclusive characters. Jumping all the way up to Season 5, we have the Diesel with a Toothache, Derek. Derek arrived to Sodor to assist Bill and Ben, but broke down while trying to make his way up Gordon's Hill. When he was finally rescued by BoCo and arrived successfully to the quarry the next day to assist Bill and Ben by being their back engine on a heavy train, he broke down yet again and the twins had to pull him and their train all the way to the docks. After this, Derek was sent to the works to be mended. And we never saw him again after this, besides appearing during a song in the movie Calling All Engines. Since the song mentions he's straining up the hill, it can be assumed that they didn't fix his problems with breaking down on hills fully. In the shot where it shows the close-up of Derek's wheels when he breaks down on Gordon's Hill the first time, you can just barely make out the British Railways lion and wheel in the middle of his body. Derek is based on a British Railways Class 17, also known as the Clayton Type 1. 117 members of this class were built between 1962 and 1965 by the Clayton Equipment Company of Derbyshire, England. Derek's problems were undoubtedly inspired by those of his basis, as the Paxman engines fitted to most of the real Class 17s were prone to a series of several mechanical issues. Because of these problems, all of the Class 17s were withdrawn by the end of 1971, after less than 10 years of service. The Class 17s had by far the shortest lives of any significant BR diesel electric locomotive design, with many examples having a working life of less than 5 years. Most had been scrapped by the end of 1975. One Class 17, however, D8568, is preserved at the Chinnor and Prince's Risborough Railway in South Oxfordshire, England. It currently resides at the Severn Valley Railway following an extensive overhaul, however. Let's do another jump ahead from Season 5 now and go all the way up to Season 7. Next up is the spotless record engine, Arthur. Arthur arrived on Sodor to shunt trucks and haul freight, according to Sir Topham Hatt, who also informed Thomas and Percy about his spotless record. On his first day, however, Thomas plays a trick on Arthur by telling him that he must stop the trucks from singing. This backfires horribly, as the trucks become angry with Arthur and pull him down Gordon's Hill. Unable to stop in time, Arthur flies down the hill and runs right into the back of Duck's goods train waiting at a crossing.
Squashed fruit flew everywhere.
Arthur's spotless record was ruined, and as punishment for tricking him, Sir Topham Hatt tells Thomas to help clean up the mess after Arthur's accident. But don't worry, the two of them made up at the end when they realized that maybe spotless records are meant to be broken.
And then mended again, finished Arthur, just like friendships.
Ugh. After this, Arthur discovered the line that runs to the fishing village, and it became one of his favorite places to visit. When Sir Topham Hatt asked for a volunteer to run the fishing village line, Arthur hoped that he would be chosen for the job, but Sir Topham Hatt sent him to work at the steelworks instead. After Thomas was sent to the fishing village to collect fish fans and got into a nasty accident, Arthur assisted him by taking his train the rest of the way to the docks. That night at the sheds, Sir Topham Hatt asks for another volunteer to run the line in Thomas's place, and Arthur speaks up, asking if he could be allowed to run the line, seeing as Thomas dislikes pulling fish trains. Sir Topham Hatt finally assigned Arthur for the job, and he has worked at the fishing village taking fish vans to the docks since. Arthur never really appeared again after this, aside from making a few sparse appearances in the hit era. As you can see on his tank sides, Arthur wears the initials LMS, which stands for the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. Arthur is based on a London, Midland and Scottish Railway IVET 2MT class tank engine developed for the LMS. The LMS had various tank engines that were showing their age, and the operating department required a new small Class 2 locomotive to replace them. Noting that the Great Western Railway 4500 and 4575 classes had been successful, George Ivat designed a new engine type, which incorporated self-emptying ash pans and rocking grates, which were labor-saving devices. A tender version of this engine, the Ivat Class 2 260, was also produced. The class was introduced between 1946 and 1952. And they were based on the LMS Stanier 262, which was in turn based on the LMS Fowler 262. 10 were built by the LMS before nationalization in 1948, and were numbered 1200 to 1209. British Railways added the prefix 4 to their numbers, and the engines became numbered 41200 to 41209. A further 120 locomotives were built by BR, these engines being numbers 41210 to 41329. Most of them were built at Crewe, including 41272, the 7,000th locomotive to be built there. The last 30 crew-built engines, 41290 to 41319, were allocated to the southern region, while the rest were London Midland region engines. Some were also allocated to the western region of BR in the 1950s and 1960s, such as numbers 41202, 41203, and 41249, which were shedded at Bristol Bath Road in 1959. They spent their lives mostly on branch line work. The class was withdrawn between 1962 and 1967, and 4 examples of these engines survive today under preservation on heritage railways. A notable example is number 41241 on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. If you take a look at Arthur's concept art from Season 7, you can see that he was originally going to wear this number on his bunker, implying that Arthur is 41241. This is where things get confusing though. 41241 was built by British Railways and thus never worked for the LMS, making the LMS on Arthur a little confusing. This is probably why they decided to remove the number on the final model. Anyways, let's move on now to our last character of the video. The last character in this video that we will be covering is Ryan. Ryan was brought to Sodor in the 2015 70th anniversary movie Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. In the movie, he was brought onto the railway and took over Thomas's place on his branch line after Thomas got into a lot of trouble with Sir Topham Hatt. This of course makes Thomas jealous of Ryan, so he tries to outperform him, which only ends up badly for him in the end. Things only escalated, however, as Ryan took on bad coal and the sparks from his funnel ended up lighting some dynamite on fire. Thomas raced to the rescue and managed to dispose of it quickly by dropping it down the mine. But to Sir Topham Hatt, it looked like Thomas was causing even more trouble for poor Ryan and endangering the others as well. Later on, Ryan is involved in the climactic chase sequence where Sailor John steals Captain Callie's ship and manages to bring it to a crashing halt by slamming into some buffers. After Thomas was fished out of the water trying to catch Sailor John, it was revealed that Ryan cleared everything up with Sir Topham Hatt, and he told him that he was proud of Thomas. At the end of the movie, the branch line up the coast to Harwick is finished, which Sir Topham Hatt assigns Ryan to help out with the goods, while Daisy meanwhile gets a promotion to help out with the passengers. Ryan has been a hard and affable worker on the Harwick branch line since then. On Ryan's side tanks, you can see the initials GNR, and these initials stand for the Great Northern Railway. Ryan is based on the Great Northern Railway Class N2, designed by Sir Nigel Gresley as an improvement of Henry Ivett's Class N1. These locomotives were built between 1920 and 1929, and the first batch, known as the N2/1 subclass, were fitted with condensing apparatuses. These apparatuses, taking the form of large distinctive pipes on the sides of the boiler, were meant to reduce the exhaust emissions of the engines, as they were used for intercity work in the metropolitan areas of London, England, which had many tunnels. Later batches of the class could also be seen around Glasgow and Edinburgh, Scotland. The N2s were designed for suburban passenger operations and worked most of the duties out of King's Cross and Moorgate, often hauling 1 or 2 sets of articulated suburban coaches. These ran to places such as New Barnet and Gordon Hill on the Hertford Loop. They also hauled some empty coaching stock trains between King's Cross and Fermi Park carriage sidings. The first withdrawal was in 1955 and another the following year, but official withdrawals didn't start until 1957. Many of their later duties included standing in for diesel failures and station pilots. The last 13 N2s were withdrawn in 1962. One member of this class, number 1744, has been preserved and operates on the North Norfolk Railway. In addition to being the sole survivor of its class, 1744 is also the sole surviving example of a Gresley-designed tank engine. Ryan's design sheet shows that he was specifically modeled after this specific engine, though Ryan does not share the engine's number, as he wears the number 1014. None of the N2s wore this number. The number was worn by a Class C2 rather than an N2 on the GNR. And there you have it, folks. With the final character covered, that'll be just about it for this video. A lot of the information in this video about the characters and when they arrived on Sodor came straight from the republication of Sodor Reading Between the Lines, which I got as a present for my brother for Christmas last year. The information about the Audrey's trip to see the tram engine that became the real Toby, however, was pulled directly from the Thomas the Tank Engine Man by Brian Sibley. I recommend checking both books out, especially the republication of Sodor Reading Between the Lines. There's a lot of new info in that book that wasn't present in the original release, like who the mysterious austerity engine was that was mentioned at the end of book 38, Wilbert the Forest Engine, information about a new branch line being built up to Harwick just like the TV series, and a lot of cool images showing the behind the scenes process of how Wilbert's books were made. Definitely check it out, as all of the support shows Christopher Audrey just how much people still care about the Railway series to this day. He'll actually be in London on June 25th of this year, so if you're in London, be sure to stop by and say hello. Anyways, I think that'll be it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. This was a fun video to work on. Researching and going in depth about the real inspirations behind Thomas characters is just so fun. It's definitely a part of why this series is so special to so many people around the world. Also, really quickly, I might make a video on the new 2026 show once the new YouTube content starts coming out, which should be in May, so be on the lookout for that too. Anyways, I'll wrap it up here. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this one. This is the TSMU fan, signing out. Special thanks to my Patreon supporter, Railway Series 64. And they give an extra special thanks to those patrons of mine who have chosen to remain anonymous. If you'd like to learn how to get your name at the end of every new video that I upload, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Link is on my channel homepage under my channel description.